Now, if you've seen any of my other videos, then you probably know how much I like a particular subgenre of FPS games, that genre being the so-called boomer shooter. Now, I'm sure plenty of you in the audience still have no idea what a boomer shooter even is. And you might be thinking, a boomer shooter? Like a boomer is in the Left 4 Dead special Infected? Well, no, boomer isn't like old people, you know? A boomer shooter is typically defined as a subgenre of FPS games that is designed to look, feel, and play like a product straight out of the 90s. Now, I've played a lot of these so-called boomer shooters in my time, a lot of which I've even covered on this channel. It's what my channel is even based on at this point. So to say the least, I have quite a bit of experience when it comes to this genre of games. And in my opinion, this game that I'll be covering today is not only one of the best FPS games I've ever played, but one of the best games I've played in general. And that game is CULTIC. Despite what that gameplay montage may make you think, this game was not developed by a team of devs, but rather it was the product of one sole developer. That developer being Jason Smith. And when I say sole developer, I mean sole developer. From the graphics, the gameplay, the music, it was all made by one guy. While the credits do list multiple people, most of them were merely QA testers. And for a game made by one guy over the course of several years, this game is truly phenomenal. I'm just gonna say this right now, go play this game. It's only about $10 on Steam, and for as low as an entry price as that is, you get a fully completed first episode and a really fun and engaging wave-based survival mode with multiple maps on top of that. This is also your one courtesy spoiler warning. While I do think that the story in this game has potential if it's built upon, it's rather simplistic in this first episode. Still, if you care about that sort of thing, then feel free to go and do something else. Or hell, just go and play the game yourself. The first episode really isn't all that long. Still here, huh? Well, for those who haven't played the game, I'm just going to give you a brief story summary right now. We take control of Detective CULTIC guy. You know what, I'm just going to call him Dave. Anyways, it's the 1960s, and we've been assigned to a case that involves the disappearances of many people who have gone missing in and around the forest and this asylum in New Grandual. Unfortunately for us, we've been kicked off the force, which means that our investigation has come to an end. At least our official investigation, that is. Detective Dave, being the incredibly unstable Sigma male FPS protagonist that he is, decides that the best course of action is to take matters into his own hands and head deep into the woods to investigate things for himself. And as is to be expected, things go terribly wrong. Since this is a video game, something terribly wrong has to happen, so we get our ass knocked out by a mysterious figure with a hatchet. We awake to find ourselves lying on top of a bed of dozens, possibly hundreds of corpses, one of which lies in front of us with an axe in his back. We'll be needing that shortly. One thing to point out right off the bat here is how unbelievably smooth the movement in this game is. It is just as good, if not better than the movement in Dusk, which is pretty damn impressive. You can already break the sound barrier by just b-hopping, but by adding in some flying kicks, you can reach terminal velocity real quick. But instead of this just being a mindless button-mashing thing you do to get from point A to point B, you actually need to put some kind of effort in, since you need to keep a consistent speed to chain together flying kicks. You'll need to master this movement too, since you need to pull off some crazy moon jumps here and there to get to certain secret areas. On the topic of secrets, they're very valuable, containing much-needed ammunition and healing supplies. This first one in the vents gives us a crate of TNT, which is just as good as it's always been. But there is an added layer of depth to it instead of just being a throwable item. Obviously, you can just light a bundle and throw it as is, which is what you'll be doing most of the time. But you can also toss out a bundle without lighting it at any time by just pressing Z. This gives you the ability to have a more controlled fuse, since nothing is more controllable than using your gun to shoot it. You also have the ability to unwrap the bundle of TNT, allowing you to chuck it as a sort of cluster bomb, which is something that I've really never seen in any other game before. That's really the beauty of this game. It takes well-known FPS staple ideas and just twists them a little bit to make the experience feel fresh and interesting. And yes, I know I've been ignoring the elephant, or I guess the gargoyle in the room right now. This game is very blood reminiscent. That's not a bad thing, hell, it's pretty damn cool. I'm personally not a huge blood guy, but I do enjoy a bit of it from time to time. But this game though? This game is the shit. Mainly because it has a cool lever action rifle, but I'm getting ahead of myself there. I haven't even talked about the enemies yet, who are also very blood adjacent, at least in the early game. Also, I promise this is the last time I bring up blood. The first type of cultists we meet are the brown-robed hatchetmen, one of which being the one that knocked our ass out in the intro. They're not too tough, since they can easily go down with a fully charged swing. Oh, and also, I'm playing on the very hard difficulty. I've already beaten this game once on hard, so I figured I'd kick it up a notch for this video. Still, if you want that blood-style cruelty, you can just play on extreme, or hell, you can even make your own custom difficulty if you really wanted to. Anyways, where was I? Oh yeah, brown-robed cultist. Once again, they're not a real threat. They throw hatchets and have a basic-ass melee attack. You can also throw hatchets, something I did very infrequently, since you can also get a pistol in this first room too. It's good for getting headshots early on, something that you'll want to be doing very often since it's usually an instant kill on most humanoid enemies. Its damage gets outpaced pretty quickly though, since we can also find a bunch of other good weapons in this map too, like the aforementioned lever action rifle, which is probably my favorite weapon in the entire game. Not just because you one-hand the thing when you have your lighter out, but because it's also extremely powerful, acting like a pocket sniper rifle until we get our hands on a proper sniper rifle. Its ammunition is rather uncommon, so I save it for long-range engagements, at least early on. We can also find ourselves a bunch of other goodies in this secret armory, like this sawed-off shotgun and this suit of blast armor. The armor system in this game is another thing that is, wait, I said I was going to stop doing that. The armor in this game is split up into two different categories. Blast and ballistic armor, which are both pretty self-explanatory. Oh, and that shotgun is pretty damn fun, too. It has pretty bad spread, but you can upgrade it with a choke to tighten its spread. And yes, there is a fully fledged weapon upgrade system in this game. You can occasionally find weapon upgrade parts dotted around the map for you to take. You can use said upgrade parts to upgrade just about any of your weapons, excluding the throwables, your hatchets, and another one that I'll get to way later on in this video. Each weapon has 4 different upgrades of varying costs, the cheapest of which only being 1 part, while the most expensive one costs 4 parts. Some of these upgrades can do pretty crazy things, like making the lever action alt-fire kills give you a couple seconds of slow-mo, or stuffing extra gunpowder into your shotgun shells to let you shotgun jump. There's also not even close to enough parts in the entire game to let you upgrade your entire arsenal. I did miss some secrets here and there, but I was still averaging out to about 50% of the secrets in just about every level. And even then, I only managed to get a few guns upgraded. I suppose this technically does add to the free play value, though. The upgrade benches you use to, well, upgrade your weapons are scattered about every level. There's usually one at the beginning of every map besides the first one. And since I've been neglecting to talk about them, let's quickly rapid fire through the enemies that we've encountered thus far. Firstly, we have the Grey-Robed Cultist, who carries a pistol. They're only really threatening in large groups, and by large groups I mean anything more than one. Then we have the Black Robes, who carry submachine guns. These guys are properly dangerous, probably the most dangerous early game enemy. Then we've got the ubiquitous Red-Robed Shotgun Cultist, who, as the name would suggest, carry a double-barreled shotgun, and they also chuck bundles of dynamite. That's all, for now at least. The enemy roster doesn't get too out there, at least not yet. You can also find various notes and pieces of lore scattered around the levels. Most of these just act as world building, but there is one standout, that being this overarching subplot about another private investigator who's been digging into the cult's activities. I think he has around 8 or 9 journal entries in the entire game, but I won't be talking about most of them here. In a vent behind the first of his many notepads, we can find ourselves a field kit, which basically acts like your portable medkit. To heal, you actually have to hold the button rather than simply pressing it once and getting all of your health back. This allows you to use the exact amount of the kit's percentage that you want. Already, I'd say that's a pretty staggering improvement, but it gets even better. You see, if you pick up some health when your health is already full, but your kit isn't, half of that pickup's gain is stored in the field kit. This is a really thoughtfully done and well-implemented mechanic, and it's something I really haven't seen in any other game before. Once again, the game takes something that was already pretty well thought out, that being the health system, and twists it just a little bit to be a little bit more interesting, adding a genuinely sensible and nice improvement to make the game more well thought out. It's really nice, actually. And while we're still on the topic of health, scattered around in certain secret areas you can find these imbued remains, which permanently increase your health by 5 for each pickup. Around the end of the game, I was rocking about 140 total health, which is certainly nice because this game can become absolutely soul-crushing near the tail end. Now, where was I? Oh, I remember. After clearing out the auto repair shop, we carve a path through some more cultist outposts before we get to the caves, where we jump down and exit out into this giant open vista packed with cultists. Now, on the topic of level design and graphics, the level design in this game is just superb. It strikes the right balance between being cramped and open at just the right times. This game's color palette is also very uniquely drab, we'll say. I'm only really calling it drab since I lack a better term at this moment in time, but in reality, some of these levels can be quite nice looking, with the parallax swirling clouds in the sky. It's very nice. But for right now, though, we're just carving a path through a bunch of really well-designed combat arenas. This game also has a very good sense of verticality to it, with a lot of the game's combat pitting you against enemies from just about every single angle. But after we clear out this entire entourage of cultists, we can jump down into this pit where the game goes all spooky mode for a bit. Not just because we have to wade through piles of dead bodies, but because this game is actually rather spooky at times. $40 barrels today, 50 tomorrow. Do good job. Make more friends. Ugh, I'm not a fan of that. I'm just going to grab this key and get out of here. Oh yeah, that's probably not good. When I said the game's roster of monsters doesn't get too out there yet, we've reached that point now. Meet the Harvester, an absolute behemoth of a monster who wields a chainsaw Dr. Salvador style. He's fucking dangerous, and they have a fuck ton of health too, and they also have the ability to throw bear traps and bundles of dynamite on top of that. Since this first one is fought in the dark, you'll have to make the decision of either using a one-handed weapon with your lighter or risking it and using something more powerful like a sawed-off shotgun. Still though, he does eventually go down, and we circle back around to the first set of caves where we can exit the level. The next level is the shipyard, and while that name may not sound like it would be a very interesting map, you'd be wrong. But then again, I'm getting ahead of myself here. At the start of the map, I decide to finally upgrade a couple of my weapons. Firstly, I upgrade my shotgun with extra powder for its shells, which allow me to shotgun jump. Not necessarily useful all the time, but it's still pretty fun. After that, I upgrade my pistol with a shoulder stock, which marginally tightens its spread. After that, I head on through some caves and jump down into the water below, revealing the actual shipyard itself. There are only a handful of actual boats here, with a few floating pontoon boats and this giant tanker ship, which is effectively the one big focal point of this map. It consists of 4 separated floors, with the bottom floor being storage and some crew barracks, the floor above that being even more barracks, and the third being a fully fledged kitchen with a little harvester fight. And then we've got the top floor, which is the main captain's deck, but to access it we need to get a key that's located all the way down on the bottom floor in one of the storage rooms. It's on a key ring of this corpse that is curiously stuck to the ceiling. Meet the ghosts. They're real dangerous boys who can telekinetically throw any physics object at you and deal massive damage. They can also do a line-of-sight telekinetic attack that deals damage over time. Thankfully, they're mercifully rare and easily dispatched with any weapon. After we get the key on the storage floor, we can head up to the captain's deck and grab the key to the caves, which are on the opposite shore from where the boat is. After we head inside, we get ambushed by some more cultists, including a harvester and a ghost in the same room, which make a surprisingly deadly duo. The caves are also, unsurprisingly, pitch fucking black, so you have the dilemma of having to use lower tier weapons with the light source or use heavier firepower and risk getting ambushed by enemies. But after we clear out the caves, we can find this giant quarry-type space, complete with a minecart track leading all the way down into this pit. And yes, you can ride said minecart, and it is as glorious as it looks. I ended up popping out early since I missed a bunch of enemies on the ride down, and I figured they'd cause more problems if I just let them be. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, the soundtrack in this game is just fucking incredible. It fits the whole semi-rogue detective vibe really well. Seriously, this is some high-quality, grade A production-level shit. Anyways, after we clear out the quarry, we can head up into the next section, which is the final gauntlet of this map, which is the shipping crate maze. Since I'm here, I suppose I should do another recap of the things that I missed out on talking about earlier. Starting off, we have another kind of throwable, the Molotov. You can get your hands on some of these all the way back in the armory in level 1, but I neglected to talk about them there in favor of talking about the armor system instead. They're very similar in function to the dynamite bundles, allowing you to throw them out lit or unlit, only this time you don't have to worry about them blowing up in your face. But instead of the TNT's cluster bomb function, you can wrap an entire bundle of dynamite to your Molotov, which is incredibly effective, and honestly I wish I used it more often because it's really good. There are also a couple of new kinds of cultists. An orange robe cultist who carries a grenade launcher. Thankfully they're mercifully rare. There's also the shield cultists who come in 2 flavors, either hatchet tossers or pistol cultists. They're easily dispatched with the lever action rifle round of the head region, which pierces their shields for some reason. Anyways, after we clear out the crate maze, we can head into the next level, which is the Mine Town, which is probably my favorite in this first episode, at least so far. It starts off in these spooky woods, and you have to grab some parts for a crank to lower a bridge. Those parts being a crank and a spare cog. But once you pick up the crank, meet the zombie. They're pseudo-tanky bastards who come in packs larger than 4 90% of the time. They only have a melee attack, but they can close the gap with a lunge attack, which is a surprisingly high amount of damage. The game spawns what I believe is an infinite number of them as you look for the cog to lower the drawbridge. Thankfully, I managed to find it relatively quickly, getting pursued by zombies all along the way. The bridge itself takes a couple seconds to lower, so this is actually a pretty tense section. But eventually the bridge lowered and we can get across into the Mine Town, and as the name would suggest, it's set around this old abandoned mine. Apparently some strange occurrences have been happening in and around the mine, at least from what I gathered by skimming these notes rather than actually reading them. Honestly, I was barely keeping up with this game's story. I was more focused on, playing the game. This section is also almost exclusively filled with zombies. There is a small warehouse that happens to be filled with cultists. Thankfully, Jason made the zombies infight with the cultists, which is not only a nice detail, but also rather helpful to us. I mean, I have the ammo to take care of all these guys, but I'd rather save it for more important things. We can also spot a curious sight behind this chain link fence. This guy is carrying what seemed to be a Sten submachine gun, which I want quite badly. There's no easy way over the fence, but if you clear out the warehouse, you can get up onto these shelves and go outside into the area behind the fence, which lets us grab that Sten. The Sten is a surprisingly good weapon in this game and basically replaces the Mauser from here on out. It uses the same ammunition and has a 50-round mag by default and deals a similar amount of damage. The reduced accuracy really isn't a problem. You already have the lever action rifle if you need to deal with some long-range threats. After I grabbed the Sten, I head over to the miner's mess hall, which had almost every entrance boarded up, save for one window on the roof. That window leads to the attic where some cultists have been holed up. I can't blame them since the mess hall downstairs is packed with the undead who are still easily dispatched with a Molotov dynamite bundle combo. We can grab the key to the basement from the main dining room too, and when we get inside we can find that thing that I was saving my ammo for. I don't know what these things are called, but they are very dangerous and tanky. Thankfully this one got stuck on something which allowed me to just unload onto it and kill it without any hassle. The key on the table allows us to get into the rock house, which has my favorite fight in the entire map. A bunch of cultists, a ghost or two, and even a harvester. It's a very diverse spread of enemies in here, and the music is just popping off too. Anyways, after we scale to the top of the rock house, we can raise up a lift to the top, which allows us to slide down to the bottom and head into the mines. The next level is the mines, and this one is another absolute banger. You might just envision this to just be a bunch of small caves, and while yes, there is some of that, we're talking about CULTIC here, so expect some insane verticality in this map. Case in point, there's a giant cavernous space with suspended platforms. I thought I had an upgrade in my lever-action rifle with an extended tube magazine, which increases its capacity from 7 to 11 rounds. The game is also nice enough to give you a nice vantage point right here, which allows us to clear out a bunch of these guys before we even get spotted. Oh, and before I move on from the weapons, I upgraded my Sten with a padded stock, which decreases its speed, and a better firing mechanism, which increases its rate of fire, which turns this thing into an absolute man-melting machine. After we clear out the first section of suspended platforms, we clear out some more caves before we jump down into this flooded section of the caves where some cultists have been defending this area from zombies. After we get back onto dry land, we can get into some more cramped caves, which have some cultists holding up various different choke points. Oh, and there's also a bunch of zombies and not one, but 2 harvesters in here. All in all, this section is actually pretty damn fun, despite how cramped it is. After we clear out this section in the mines, we can find our way into this large arena-style space that is definitely not an ambush. And of course, we could jump by 2 of these things. I don't have any kind of manual, so I don't have real names to work off of, but, you know, it doesn't really matter. I tossed a Molotov TNT combo out the tube and managed to light one of them on fire, which for some reason got him stuck in his little monster closet. The other one went down pretty easily after some circle strafing and sustained fire. I do like the fact that the game shows how the cultists actually set up an ambush, you know, showing how much of a pain in the ass that we've been for this cult. After I get out of the arena, I head up into this room with this pulley system with a cart that takes us into another suspended platform section, which, surprise surprise, is also filled with cultists. After I clear them out, I head further up into the caves, along the way getting ambushed by, you guessed it, even more cultists. Yeah, if there's one thing that I can kinda give this game shit for, it's lack of common enemy variety. At least in Blood, you had things like hellhounds and gargoyles and zombies and all these other kinds of common enemies, but here it's mostly just cultists for most of the game. It's a little disappointing, but really it's not that big of a deal since the combat in this game is still so fun anyways. I know I've been shotgunning my way through a lot of these levels, but they're actually incredibly well paced, usually featuring plenty of much needed downtime between the giant fights. They also give you plenty of time to explore and look around for secret areas and little lore tidbits. And generally across the board, the level design is just great. Anyways, eventually, after we clear out even more cultists, we can get back to the starting area, which has been repopulated with enemies. We can use the key we picked up a while back to unlock this big metal door with a harvester behind it, because of course we have to fight another harvester. But after that, we can get into this area that is an elevator being guarded by a bunch of cultists. Honestly, this is probably the hardest fight in the game thus far. Whatever is down this elevator shaft must have been very important to warrant all this protection. Welcome to the crypts. Considering the fact that this cult has a bizarre fascination with death, at least judging by the ghost piece, well, the piles and piles of corpses we've stumbled across, it's no wonder that these guys have been interested in this place. Before I go in any further than the first room, I upgrade my shotgun with double-aught buckshot, which increases its raw stopping power. A very worthy upgrade considering the fact that this level is incredibly cramped at times. This level tasks us with unlocking this little armory space to get another key, which will allow us to get back up to the surface, and also to get that cool gun in there. But to get that key to the armory, we need to delve deep into the crypts, which are also partially flooded, both with water and the undead. Eventually, though, after navigating the incredibly labyrinthine crypts, we can find the key on a skeleton whose arm is poking out of a coffin, and once we grab it... That's right, all of the coffins that were dotted around the map have been hiding skeletons inside of them that just miraculously come back to life. And they're cultist skeletons, with hatchets and guns, too. Basically, everything after the first section of the crypts is just great, honestly, because the level pretty much picks up tenfold from here. You can also finally grab the gun that was sitting on the armory alongside the key, which, in keeping with the World War II weapons theme, is an FG-42 with a nice scope. It basically replaces the lever-action rifle for general sniper duty. Still, it's balanced pretty well by the fact that the ammo for it is rare, and you'll still likely use the lever action pretty often. You can also get your hands on another new weapon in this map, albeit this one is in a secret area instead. It's a China Lake pump-action grenade launcher, and it is absolutely glorious. You'll be needing it too, since once you grab the key to progress further into the level, you can take part in probably my favorite fight in the entire game. Also, I promise this is the last time I bring up the music, but the music during this fight is just absolute fire. This section also introduces us to a new enemy, that enemy being these weird fat boys who are incredibly tanky. These guys are pretty dangerous, I'd say, since they can get down on all fours and run at you, closing the gap surprisingly fast. They can also spit some toxic goo shit at you, which I'm assuming is dangerous. I wouldn't know, I never got hit by one in my entire playthrough. To get to the lift back to the surface, we need to find a plunger for a detonator so we can detonate the TNT on this rock pile which is blocking the way. And when we do, we can find a batch of human cultists, including an enemy that I've been neglecting to mention for the past level or two now, the armored cultist. These guys are properly dangerous, probably being the most dangerous normal cultist type in the entire game. They can carry a shotgun and a submachine gun at the same time and can even crouch to avoid fire. They also have a ton of health when compared to normal cultists, taking 2 lever action rounds to the head before going down. I figured I'd save these guys for now because after this they start appearing relatively frequently during normal gameplay. Once we take the lift up, we can get to the next map, the chapel, and this one starts by giving us a nice spread of ammunition and weaponry. Something about this gives me the bad feeling that we're going to be in for a boss fight. And well, there will be a boss fight, but first you have to kill an entire army of enemies. Just about every enemy type that we've faced thus far, excluding the skeletons from the crypts. A couple harvesters, some ghosts, and of course an entire platoon of cultists. Thankfully, with our fully stocked arsenal and a swath of new upgrades, this fight is actually pretty damn easy. Once you're done thinning out the horde of common enemies, the level finally drops the boss on us. That boss being the T-26E4 Super, which is just a fucking tank. It can fire out the common explosive shells, but it can also send out a little goon on top of the machine gun as well. The game also continues to spawn enemies in and around the church too, so you'll never have a chance to catch a break from this thing. Still, this boss is quite easy, since you can just hide behind a pillar right in front of it and throw a nearly endless stream of dynamite bundles at it until it explodes. I only stopped doing this because it felt kind of cheap and I wanted to use other weapons too. I mean, come on, we have a grenade launcher. I have all these 40mm shells, I have to use them eventually. But finally, the thing goes down, and you might be thinking, well, that's it, right? Surely there can't be more game left, right? We've killed a fuck ton of goons and beaten the giant big bad tank. In most cases, this would be the end of the episode challenge, and yet we still have 4 entire maps left to go through. The next level is the Asylum grounds, and it's my second favorite in the entire game. It starts off by ambushing us with a new enemy type, that enemy type being the green robe cultists. You can't see them, that's because they're far away, and they also have an FG-42 sniper rifle, and they're basically the cult's marksmen. These guys are incredibly dangerous. If you can't spot them before they spot you, then, well, you're basically fucked. Thankfully, they're only about as tanky as the rest of the cultists, besides the armored ones at least, so they're pretty easy to take down. The first half of this map is basically spent getting you acquainted with these guys exclusively. Really, this level doesn't exactly pick up until you get to the Asylum properly, and then things get really good. I mean, this entire area is just awesome. You have to find a can of gas to power this generator to get to the roof, but that gas can you need is locked away inside of this thinly veiled Walking Dead reference. But, to get the key to that, you need to head through this flooded tunnel that leads into this hedge maze. Normally that'd be a problem, but the rest of this map is so good that I don't even really care, it's actually pretty damn fun. And obviously, since the music fades away, you get jumped by a harvester. Wait, no, actually 2 harvesters. Wait, no, count them, 3, that's right, 3 harvesters. Not a big deal, since now we have the game's entire arsenal, including the last weapon, the flamethrower. This thing is actually pretty nice, even if you can't upgrade it. Since fire in this game ignores shields, this thing became my go-to weapon for dealing with shield cultists. And just for general mop-up duty as well. But to get one, you have to kill a flame cultist, and they're pretty damn tough. They are by far the toughest cultist type in the entire game. Despite the fact that they look like normal armored cultists, these guys have like twice the health that they do, taking an obscene amount of punishment before they go down. I know this is to encourage you to shoot the big yellow tank on their back, but that was almost impossible for me to do, mainly because they face you directly 90% of the time. Or I don't know, maybe I just suck at this game. Yeah, you know what, it's probably that. Anyways, after we grab the key from the hedge maze, we can grab the fuel can from the garage and head up to the roof of the Asylum. And, surprise surprise, it's packed full of cultists. But finally, after we clear them out, we can head on inside the Asylum by jumping into this ominously dark hole. And the next map is, shocker, Set in the Asylum. This one is probably the spookiest one in the entire game, if you can even call this game spooky to begin with. It features the most overtly horror elements, and by that I mean it has the most ghost enemies out of any other map in the entire game. The first half is pretty enemy-free, but eventually after carving a path through some undead and beastly enemies, we can make our way up to an attic-type space, where we can find a bunch of brown-robed cultists performing some kind of ritual. These guys have a weird red aura around their heads, and they can tank quite a bit more than the normal cultists. I'm not entirely sure what changed, but in reality, I don't care. I'm honestly not too interested in the lore of this game, if you couldn't tell. In terms of gameplay, the imbued, yeah, we'll go with that. For the most part, most of the imbued cultists aren't terribly too tough when compared to their normal counterparts. They can tank quite a bit more damage, and I think they're a little more aggressive, but I'm not entirely sure on that last one. Still, they're not the only new enemy in this map. Be the knight, because of course the random suits of armor that are dotted around the map just have to pop to life and start attacking you. They're not too terribly tough. They have a similar attack pattern to the zombie, but with a little more health. But after a while of exploring this sprawling building, we can get up to this sort of bell tower area where we can find another can of gas for another elevator that leads down into God knows where. But once we grab it, we can step back down into the main atrium where we can find that the building has been set on fire and the atrium itself has been repopulated with enemies. But once we clear all of the enemies out, we can fill up a generator and head down into the depths, another step closer to finding the answers that we've been so desperate to find. The next map is the penultimate map in the game, and it's called the Dig. This one is basically just one long test of the player's abilities in combat, as it pits us against just about everything we faced up until this point. It's just one long gauntlet of enemies, and I have to say, it's pretty damn fun. After we carve a path through the army of cultists that were waiting for us, we can finally reach what they've been guarding this entire time. The temple, or some building, I don't really know, I haven't really been reading any of the notes, so I guess that's on me for not knowing what it is. Once we get inside, we have to clear out some more cultists before descending down this gigantic spiral staircase which leads us into the rest of the temple. In reality, there isn't much to touch on here in terms of gameplay. We're still just being pitted against an absolutely gobsmacking number of enemies, just about every enemy in the game, and including this cave which is filled with more beastly enemies than the undead, which is a pretty nice fight. Let's see here, oh, there's this cool lava wall room you need a crank for. There's also this cool arena set in this gigantic cavern with snipers on both sides. Yeah, that's about it, really. I know I've said this multiple times now, but this is almost exclusively a test for the player's abilities, and it features very little in terms of story development. I mean, I have been neglecting to talk about this game's story because, you know, it's a boomer shooter, I came here to shoot cultists and feel like I'm playing Blood, but that's besides the point. But anyways, when we finally carve a path through the last of the cult's main forces, we can reach the Ritual Chamber, which is the final map of the episode. Obviously, this being the last map and all, the game loads us up with ammo for just about every weapon we have. And when we're finally done loading up, we can enter the chamber itself, and obviously, we get jumped by the final boss, which is this thing. It's called the Abomination, which I'd say is quite a fitting title, all things considered. He's a little more complex than the tank fight, but not by much. He only has a couple attack, mainly either throwing shit at you or doing a little bitch smack, and he can also spawn enemies too, which aren't really that big of a deal. To actually take him out, you need to weaken him by shooting him in the face, and then it'll open up his ribcage, allowing you to just run up at him and throw bundles of TNT at him until he either dies or his stomach closes off. This fight caused me a bit of trouble in my first attempts, and he did kill me once, but eventually I found the optimal strategy, which is to just unload on him with an upgraded Sten, preferably one with an extended mag and an upgraded fire group. This thing just chews through his armor in seconds, and after a couple cycles of this, he'll go down. After we kill him, the chamber starts to crumble around us, and a portal opens up in the Abomination's chest cavity, and with no other place to go, this game is fucking great. Honestly, it is unironically one of the best shooters I've ever played. Like, ever, really. Everything is extremely well polished, from the gunplay, the maps, the atmosphere, the music, and my god, just the music. There are very few things that I'd say need to be changed, but I still have two. Personally, I think the game could have done with more period-appropriate weapons. I know it makes sense for the cult to have more antiquated weapons from previous world wars, but the game is set in the 60s, so it would be cool to see some more period-modern weaponry in the hands of the cultists, if the cultists are even in the next episode. The other complaint I have, if you can even call it a complaint, is the common enemy variety. I like fighting the cults and all that, but I would have liked some more out-there enemies for the common roster. Something like the gargoyles or the zombies from Blood. There are enemies like that in this game, but they're separated off into their own separate sections of the game, usually being relegated to their own little level sections. All in all, though, this game kicks ass. For the price that it currently is, it is well and truly worth a purchase if you're a fan of the genre. Apparently the second episode will be released as DLC in the future rather than just as an update for the base game, which is weird, but fine I guess, but whatever. Anyways, though, that's all for me this time around. Thanks for watching.